morning. Welcome to NewsWire on SportsGrid. Today is Friday. We have a great show planned for you today, so stick around for the entire hour, of course, if you can. We got Warren Sharp on the program ahead of AFC and NFC Championship weekend. We'll break it all down for you. Also, guest contributors from Sporting News. We got Vinnie Iyer in the house talking coaches. Also, over at Legal Sports Report, touching on what is perhaps, thus far, the biggest sports betting scandal that has happened since legalized sports betting has come to pass. At least in my opinion, this is a big one. And this is where we got to start here on the show today. A staggering story and number of bets placed by a former collegiate athlete. This is Patriots wide receiver Kayshon Boutte, arrested for illegal sports betting while he was at Louisiana State University. Not only are these allegations claiming that some of the wagers involved his own team and himself at LSU, but the number of wagers that he placed is approximately 9,000 over a period of years where he wasn't even allowed to bet on sports, not being of legal age, using a sports book that you had to be legal to use, hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially going back and forth in the sports book. In fact, using his real name in some cases with some numbers at the end. It was able to be figured out, and they ended up arresting him. But needless to say, a lot more questions than answers that we'll have to find out in the future, and how this potentially could affect collegiate sports athletes as well. We'll dive into this a little bit later in the show. Okay, now let's get over to better news in the National Football League. The hiring circle continues. This time, Buccaneers offensive coordinator Dave Canales has found himself in the same division, but with a new team. He's heading over to be with the Carolina Panthers as their new head coach. He was the OC there and spent some time, of course, in Seattle, and now he becomes the head coach. Congratulations to him taking over Tampa Bay. Buccaneers offense looked good this past year. The Atlanta Falcons have made their choice. This happened after our show yesterday. Their new head coach is Raheem Morris. They hired the Rams defensive coordinator. Morris, of course, a former head coach in the National Football League as well. For those of you waiting on Deebo Samuel to play this weekend, whether he will, whether he not, who knows? He did practice for the San Francisco 49ers on yesterday, so some good news there. And the Associated Press has unveiled their finalists for the National Football League MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, Dak Prescott are the finalists for the NFL's Most Valuable Player and Offensive Year awards. Josh Allen and 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy are also finalists, and Offensive Player of the Year also possibilities include Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb. Also remembering that these awards are voted on at the end of the regular season. First game up on Sunday is the AFC Championship, where the Ravens are 3.5-point favorites over the Kansas City Chiefs. How does Warren Sharp see this game playing out on Sunday? It's time now to check in with Warren. Here is the Sharp Report.
Well, I would prefer Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs to utilize a lot of play action against the Ravens, because the Ravens really struggled to defend it. Out of 48 quarterbacks with 100-plus attempts this season, Patrick Mahomes ranks 45th in play action usage rate. So I don't really foresee that as a realistic alternative for them to utilize in this game. However, I do think they should lean a lot more into their 2 tight end or 3 tight end passing formations. That is because the Baltimore Ravens struggle massively against it. And it's a big part of the reason why is because they load the boxes a little bit when defenses present these heavier personnel groupings. Let's dive into it. On early downs, the Ravens defend 3 wide receiver formations with light boxes on 74% of the snaps. That's the 7th most light boxes. So they're really good against the pass because they're playing with light boxes there. But when teams trot out 2 or more tight ends onto the field, the Ravens will use 7+ box defenders on a well above average 87%. That's the 10th highest rate of heavy boxes. Now, when they utilize these heavier boxes, they're easier to pass against. And the Baltimore Ravens defending 11 personnel passes when they're playing these lighter boxes rank number 3 in EPA per attempt, number 4 in success rate, and number 3 in yards per attempt. However, defending 2 tight end passes, because they're playing with heavier boxes and less players to defend these passes, they rank 10th worst in EPA per attempt and 26th in yards per attempt. Their yards per attempt allowed moves from 5.7 all the way down to 8.7 from 11 personnel passes to 12 plus personnel passes. So I think the Kansas City Chiefs, it's something they like to do, is to utilize some two tight end sets to pass the football out of. They really need to lean into that even more so against this Baltimore Ravens team, because that is absolutely a key weakness for Baltimore.
All right, thanks very much, Warren. Warren will be with us later. We'll talk some props for the weekend as well in the AFC and NFC Championship. Okay, Jim Harbaugh has taken his talents to Los Angeles to become the next head coach of the Chargers. Sharon Moore had a meeting with Michigan yesterday. All signs are pointing to him taking over as head coach, but have to wait here a little bit to make their final decision. Remember Dino Babers, head coach of Syracuse? Arizona is expected to hire him as their next offensive coordinator, and also Wisconsin is expected to hire USC defensive coordinator Alex Grinch as safeties coach. And by the way, Georgia's Dooley Field's going to replace Hedges before next season, just having a little facelift there over in Athens. Okay, in the National Basketball Association, All-Stars were given out yesterday. We'll get to that here in a sec. But there's big news in the NBA regarding Kristaps Porzingis. He exited the game last night due to an ankle sprain. The Celtics beat the Heat 143-110, but Porzingis left the game midway through the third quarter, did not return. 19 points in that game, big player for Boston. We'll see what his injury ends up being. LeBron makes history, 20th All-Star selection. Jokic, Durant, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka, those are some of the names that are going to be playing in Indianapolis coming up next month. Ben Simmons and his back seem to be getting better, could return as soon as Monday. 2.5 months he's been out, Ben Simmons. This has been a recurring theme over the last few years. And the Portland Trailblazers, by the way, after being very upset earlier in the week and protesting their game over a missed timeout, have decided not to protest after all, and they will just take the L. Okay, fair enough. Another story we're following here on NewsWire, we're going to talk about it with our friends from Legal Sports Report. For those of you who play fantasy football over on the National Fantasy Football Championships website, NFFC, an employee was fired over a scandal that involved cheating. One of the employees apparently teaming up with one of the players too. Very troubling story, which we'll get to coming up a little bit later. Jack Sinner knocked out the Joker. Novak Djokovic, he is out at the Australian Open. Yesterday, David Robertson, according to ESPN, has agreed to a one-year deal, $11 million with the Texas Rangers after pitching with the Mets and the Marlins last year. And the NWSL is introducing their first ever streaming platform. It's called the NWSL Plus. Starting this season, they're going to stream 69 soccer matches free across the United States. We'll take a quick time out here on the show. Coming up next, our buddy Vinnie Iyer from Sporting News joins us to talk about the coaching carousel in the NFL, and maybe Brandon Staley, fired coach from LA, has a chance to head to a new place. He has an interview today. We'll tell you where next.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different, like roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
He feels like he's got unfinished business, right? He won the national championship, did what he said he wanted to do going back to Ann Arbor.
And, he coached, I think, with the Raiders as an assistant and then got the job with the Niners and then went to title games, went to Super Bowls, lost to his brother. And I think you're right. Unfinished business. Go back. Try to win a Super Bowl.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. The coaching changes in the NFL over the last couple of days are coming in fast and furious. We thought we would check in with Vinnie Iyer of Sporting News to go over them and what could potentially be in the future for the remaining spots open. Vinnie, great to have you back here on NewsWire. And my gosh, it's like every defensive coordinator that had a job is heading to another place for a different job. Every head coach that was fired is heading to become a defensive coordinator. It's like this recycling is going on like at insane levels the last couple days.
Yeah, I don't know if there's enough coaches to go around, to be honest. I mean, the last 2 years, we've seen so much turnover at offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach. I think they're just trying to find guys to fill gaps at this point. I mean, there's just not that many qualified candidates for these jobs. So you got to go with people who've done it before.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, so let's start off with the biggest coaching hire of, let's just say, sort of the offseason, although we're not really in the offseason yet. Jim Harbaugh decided inevitably to leave the University of Michigan, and he took the head coaching job with the Los Angeles Chargers. So much is being made about how quick a turnaround could potentially come in LA. I don't know, Vinny. I'm a little skeptical here that he's just going to walk in the door and all of a sudden the Chargers are going to win 11 games. But I suppose if you just look at track record, wherever he's been, success will follow. It just may not be maybe as fast as everybody thinks.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a couple years, and partly because this roster needs to be addressed a little bit. Austin Eckler's old. He's a free agent. They have a lot of money invested in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, so they have to decide what they're going to do with those key receivers for Justin Herbert, and they might move on, right? I mean, they used the first-round pick last year. We'll see how they like Quentin Johnston. They have Josh Palmer. So they're going to have to make some critical decisions for their offensive skill players. I think they could still work on their offensive line, and these are all things that are critical, right, to Jim Harbaugh's success, is getting the running game going, getting the quarterback in line with all his weapons. So it's going to take a little bit of time to do that. Now, the defense, I think, has a little bit of upside here if they can get the secondary fixed a little bit, because again, if Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are on the field and you get Derwin James, not bad playmaking group, but you maybe have to get a little tougher inside and just look in the back end. Really, that was their big weakness here. So there's quite a bit of personnel issues they got to figure out. But the one thing he doesn't have to figure out, he's got his elite starting quarterback. All the other job openings do not have this option. So that's why he had to take it.
Yeah, no, that's the key point here. I mean, the Carolina Panthers thought they had their elite quarterback when they drafted Bryce Young. That still is very much a question right now. But Dave Canales, I think, maybe did the best offensive coordinator job of anybody not named Ben Johnson this season and last season. My gosh, Tampa Bay rode that offense really far this year, almost basically to the NFC Championship. And the Panthers are going to make this move here. Now, again, I don't want to be skeptical of hires here, Vinny, but the Panthers are just continuing to hire and fire coaches, and they just, in my opinion, fired a really good offensive coordinator. So I guess here we go again is probably the best way to look at it. And unfortunately for Canales, maybe unlike some other spots, this owner just has no patience with the head coaches. It's like a year or two and done. I hope that they give him more time.
Yeah, he does need more time. And I think what you're looking at is maybe the quick turnarounds that he had with Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. No offense to those guys, but Bryce Young has much higher upside than those guys. I mean, he's also not a veteran who's been through the ringer. I mean, he's going into year 2, so this is a reboot for him. And Canales has been outstanding working with those guys. And they're not exactly the same skill set, but I think Bryce Young has some of those qualities, right? He's smallish like Baker, but can move around, make plays. Geno Smith, I think you saw him get more confident as a downfield passer. So these are the things they want to put together, mash up what he did in the other 2 stops with those quarterbacks. So that was the number one thing. Who can fix the quarterback? This guy has fixed 2 quarterbacks that we thought were done, right, in the last 2 years. So that's a great way to maybe approach it. And then looking at it overall, there's a little bit of a relationship between him and Dan Morgan going back to the Seahawks days. This is a tapping into a successful tree with Pete Carroll. So there's a lot of good things to like about this hire, and we'll see where it goes. But again, patience is key with the owner because you're not going to get overnight results with this team.
Yeah, and let's move on now to the Atlanta Falcons, which has really been the most compelling interview process of them all, and a lot made public here, Vinny. So that's kind of why we get to dissect it. They initially interview Bill Belichick, they interview him again, and I would have sat on this show a week ago thinking, all right, he's got to be the guy. Why would they bring him in twice? But wow, they inevitably not just didn't choose him, but several other coaches in the NFL coaching tree. Not to mention, Vinny, we hear a report after they ended up hiring Raheem Morris that it seems like somehow Rich McKay may not be directly involved with whoever this coach and GM is too. So I kind of wonder what's going on in Atlanta with Arthur Blank.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, Raheem Morris, his first coaching job was in the same division with the Buccaneers. So he returns there, familiar competition for him. And look, he's done a great job. And we used to have the old joke of just hire someone who worked with Sean McVay, but Raheem Morris probably should get more credit for what he did during their Super Bowl run. And we look at all the offensive coaches. I know Brandon Staley didn't work out on the defensive side, but Raheem Morris, I think, is going to be a better coach the second time around. Maybe he was thrown into the fire a little bit too young the first time and didn't really have a good quarterback situation there. So this is the key, right? I mean, regardless of what Raheem Morris does to help the defense, and I think they'll have a profound impact based on what he did in LA. Question mark is going to be, can they get a quarterback and how are they going to operate the offense? So that's still the number one question in Atlanta. And if they can get quarterback figured out a little bit, I think they got to feel better about where their defense can go.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Also, news today that is happening as we speak, just as a heads up, Joe Barry, who was fired by the Packers, is interviewing with the Eagles, I believe, as a coordinator position. Maybe I got that one wrong, or maybe the Bears. I can't even keep up. I'm sorry, Vinny.
Yeah.
But I do know that Brandon Staley interviewed with the Packers. That I got right. The Bears. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. So Joe Barry maybe to the Bears from the Packers, and then potentially Brandon Staley maybe from the Chargers to the Packers. I think I got all that right. It's the same coaches, just changing spots here. I mean, it's really incredible when you think about it. Vic Fangio goes from Miami to LA, or from Miami to Philadelphia, and nobody with Miami right now. Okay, I think I got all that right. Just nobody hit rewind on what I just said. Now, let's go to the openings. That is clear. The openings that are still available in the NFL. The Commanders have not hired a new head coach. And since Pete Carroll and the Seahawks have parted ways, they have not hired a new head coach. Now, Bill Belichick, of course, is still out there, but so is Ben Johnson. And I cannot imagine, Vinny, a team not hiring Ben Johnson over the last 2 years. I'll be completely wrong on this one if he doesn't end up with one of these two teams.
Yeah, I think the Commanders are the most exciting, right? They're sitting on the number 2 overall pick. They don't have really any issues with their offensive weapons. You have Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. There are some things that you can do there. Their offensive line has played a little bit better. So you just could be a quarterback away. They got to rebuild the defense. They let some high-priced guys go in trades with Bright, or with looking at what they did with Montez Sweat and moving on from Chase Young. So when you look at that, I look at the Commanders, they can be committed. Also, new ownership group, new GM that they got from the 49ers system. So I think things are slowly turning the page with the Commanders. It's not the old Commanders that we used to have with Dan Snyder, right? There's some upside and potential with the right coach and the right personnel moves from the new GM. So that's what I think. Ben Johnson's probably going to end up in Washington. Now, Seattle has been rather quiet. I'm wondering if Dan Quinn still could be on the radar for them.
Yeah, crazy that the picture you see there, Bill Belichick, looks like he is not going to be the head coach of an NFL team this year. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later in the program, Vinny. We only have 30 seconds to go here, but I would imagine a year off for Bill Belichick, he's almost guaranteed to get a job next year, right?
I don't know. Let's see. I mean, if 8 openings weren't suitable for him this year, I mean, what are 8 more openings going to do? We don't know. He's going to be 72 in April, so it's going to only get tougher going forward, but he's going to try to coach because he wants to catch and pass Don Shula.
Yeah, if that's the only reason, I don't think he's going to get hired. At least that's what it would appear. All right, Vinny, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, thanks, Craig.
Matthew Waters joins us next.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division I favorite. don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different like roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
He feels like he's got unfinished business, right? He won the national championship, did what he said he wanted to do going back to Ann Arbor.
And, he coached, I think, with the Raiders as an assistant, and then got the job with the Niners, and then went to title games, went to Super Bowls, lost to his brother, and I think you're right, unfinished business, go back, try to win a Super Bowl.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. We all love a good scandal, right? Sometimes we learn from them. Sometimes we don't understand them. But the world of sports betting just continually gives us content on scandals. And the one that we got today to talk about with myself and Matthew Waters from Legal Sports Report probably goes at the top or close to it with sports wagering. I think when I look at this, Matthew, like it still rubs me wrong that the coach of that college baseball team was like dumb enough to call somebody and try and make a bet on his own game or something like that at Great American Ballpark whenever that happened. Like that one to me is sort of lumped into this. But let's get into this one. This player in football at LSU, I mean, this is not just one game. This is not just one attempt. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars going back and forth on himself and his team. And I have a feeling this is the one that's going to finally bring the hammer down, so to speak, on different kind of regulations. Because I just simply think that we can't, this one is just not going to go away that quickly.
I have to agree with you, Craig. I mean, we've had a couple of these now, but when this came across our desk yesterday, everybody just kind of stopped and thought, oh, wow. You know, you have Butte, who's now a professional athlete, but when he was in college, you're talking about almost 9,000 bets that he made. And it's just stunning the way that this happens, right? You talk about the coach and making a dumb decision with the Alabama game. Talk about a dumb decision here with him signing up with his own name as the username. You couldn't even write that. Nobody would believe it, right? He funded it allegedly with his mother's bank card. And look, I guess he was pretty good at gambling because he had almost those 9,000 bets. And you're right, it talked about potentially six figures back and forth. But the biggest issue that we have here is that he bet on himself. And the Pete Rose argument does not hold any water. It does not matter that he bet on himself to go over on receiving yards and to get a touchdown. He bet on himself. And so that changes how an athlete is going to enter the game and perform in a game. And so, I think you talk about the sheer number of bets. I think you talk about the fact that he bet on himself. And I think we're looking at a real issue here that somebody needs to do something about. Now, look, FanDuel found the activity back in July. And so they've been working on this for a while, trying to get everything, cross all the T's, dot all the I's. So it was caught. But, I mean, to do it almost 9,000 times and to bet on yourself in at least 17 NCAA football games, and 6 of those at least were LSU, it's a tough look, Craig. This is not great for the industry when we get these black marks like this. And we just haven't seen anything this big, right? I mean, we thought Calvin Ridley, including the Falcons in a parlay, remember how upset everybody was about that. And now to have this is in my opinion, it's a totally different monster that really does need to be addressed.
Yeah, and to go a little further into this, and you brought up Pete Rose, so I want to mention this. So, with full transparency, Pete has been on my shows for many, many years, a lot of different shows that I've done. I'm still a huge fan of Pete Rose, and I do think that Pete Rose should be in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. They should have an induction ceremony and everything to put him in. Matt, it's 50 years later here already. Like, I understand he did the wrong thing. But he's been punished for like decades and decades and decades. Like, I think that the time is up on that. But the key point that you brought up, that it's unforgivable with Pete, just like it's unforgivable with this player, is not the fact, and I see this online too, it doesn't make sense to me. Oh, well, if he bet on himself, then what is the problem? He's just rooting for himself. Matt, that's not it. It's the times that he did nothing. It's the times that he didn't do anything at all. That is signaling to everyone else, his friends, his teammates, people that he knows, that he doesn't like his matchup in a prop, or he doesn't like his team's matchup against another team. And that was, if indeed Pete Rose ever bet on his team, fantastic, great. He thought they were going to win when Mario Soto was pitching. I remember it vividly. But what about the games he just did nothing? He thought his team was going to lose that day. And I think that is the defining line with this. And I think people are not seeing that the right way, because we're in this new world of legalized sports betting where people are just betting on props. And they're like, oh, who cares? He bet on his own prop. Well, what about the day he didn't? Like at that point, he's like, oh, I'm not going to have a good game today. And then that opens up the door for all these other questions.
Right. Yeah, no, you're completely right about that. And look, I feel the same way about Pete Rose. But you're totally right. The inactions tend to speak louder than the actions in this point. And yeah, you have to wonder who he told that he wasn't betting. And did that give them an edge to maybe go on the under for him? You just don't know. And so no, you can't just throw it away and say he bet on himself. He was going to be great. It's exactly what you said. You have to look at when he didn't and what happened with those situations too.
Again, maybe not an intelligent guy here to use his own name, but maybe smart enough to tell somebody, make some other money with somebody. Hey, look, I'm not going to bet on myself here today. You do it, pay me. I mean, I'm not alleging that happened by any means, but that's the reason why this question has to come more to light on this. So not the last we've heard of this. Okay, now this is another troubling one because on my show, Fantasy Sports Today, we use a lot of discussion on the NFFC, the National Fantasy Football Championships, and also the NFBC, the National Fantasy Baseball Championships. They have these huge contests, live drafts in New York City every year, and in Las Vegas, they're coming up again. And to me, I mean, not as certainly disturbing as this story about LSU, but this is just another one that makes you want to question a lot of things. Without a doubt, there's an employee that was involved in a contest for the National Fantasy Football Championships that allowed a player to swap in to a lineup after he had already scored a touchdown and he thought he was going to get away with this. And Matthew, I understand that this company is going to come out, they're going to make statements, and they're going to say all the right things here. But you would be so naive to not want to go take a look back at every contest that's ever been happening at the NFFC and NFBC. I'm sorry to say, that to me is, I would look at all the things that I lost and I would want to go back and see, hey, was there anything screwy going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's another just unfortunate situation. And the fantasy sport industry has had a bunch of these lately where, companies are just up and disappearing with people's money, not paying them back, what have you. And now you get something like this where you can't even trust the staff of these companies now. And yeah, it leads to that skepticism. It leads to that perception that, well, if something went wrong here, when else did it happen? Where else could it have happened? How much money did I lose because somebody missed this? Because look, this seems like a really dumb thing to try to do too, because the changes are time-stamped according to Sports Hub. So I don't know how anybody thought they were going to get away with this, unless maybe just enough people weren't looking at it, paying attention. This is something that we need to hear more about as well. The fantasy industry has taken some lumps lately, and when you talk about competitions that are as big as this, we're not talking about casual players. We're not talking about people that are throwing $5 down on a 50-50 with their friends on DraftKings. We're talking about real money, real players, and it's just crazy, Craig, if I'm being honest with you, because you hope that this kind of stuff does not happen. You trust that these companies have everything under wraps and secure. It feels crazy to me to still be talking about fantasy sports scandals like this, 9 years after DraftKings and FanDuel had a scandal of their own. It just makes you wonder how something like this could have happened. And again, to your point, if it happened now, when else did it happen? I think that skepticism is completely fair. I think Sports Hub coming out and defending and saying that, this is the only time that we've seen it, I think that's completely fair too. But we have to do more than say it, right? I think people want to know for sure.
Yeah, the first statement I would make is saying it's a one-time thing and we fired the employee. I mean, that's by the book. But that can't be the end. You have to put much better safeguards in place and do a thorough search with all of contests that have happened, even if it's for $1. I mean, who's to think if I'm this guy who's now been fired, oh, woe is me. Maybe this guy tried getting in on a $1 tournament. It worked and said, oh, let me try the 5,000 and see what happens. I mean, crazy stuff.
Exactly.
All right, now, no more scandals. Let's move over to earnings week. Caesars with some news here and kind of showing some new hold here in terms of finances. And what did you think that you made of how they did?
Yeah, they pre-reported these earnings because they they offered some notes, or they were tendering some of their notes back, their debt, buying debt back. But I thought this was really interesting. Caesars had said that they weren't going to promo a whole lot, but they promoted more this quarter, the fourth quarter, than they did 2022. They gave out $69 million in promos, and it makes sense, right? Because you had Fanatics and ESPN bet coming back. But to me, what's interesting is they took less dollars bet, but they improved their revenue, their top line revenue, and that's from those parlays, man. I try to tell everybody all the time, you're giving your money to these companies, and shareholders thank you for playing these parlays. And it shows, and it's not just Caesars, it's across the board now. Everybody is improving their parlay product. Everybody is adding bigger menus. Everybody has new products. And it's, if you get a big win, that's great, but you probably won't. And you're probably just giving them your money.
Yeah, probably so. All right, Matt, enjoy the games this weekend. Sorry your Eagles aren't involved. Maybe next year. Appreciate you coming on the show. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, sir. Take care.
All right, we'll be back right after this.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now he's a little bit more over money, but he's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different like roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
He feels like he's got unfinished business, right? He won the national championship, did what he said he wanted to do, going back to Ann Arbor.
And, he coached, I think, with the Raiders as an assistant, and then got the job with the Niners, and then went to title games, went to Super Bowls, lost to his brother, and I think you're right, unfinished business, go back, try to win a Super Bowl.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. It's time for us to take a closer look at the NFC Championship game. We'll get a double dose of it. We got Warren Sharp from the Sharp Report and Sharp Football Analysis coming up in just a few minutes. But first, let's check in with our friend Ben Stevens of the Early Line. He has a preview of the second game on Sunday.
Craig, now just 2 days away from Conference Championship Sunday in the National Football League. The NFL's Final Four, and in the NFC, two teams, both looking for a spot in Super Bowl 58. Two teams in very different spots entering the NFC Championship game, with the Detroit Lions in a conference championship for the first time in 32 years. Meanwhile, the San Francisco 49ers have appeared in the NFC title game 4 of the last 5 NFL seasons. So we go to Santa Clara on Sunday night, where the San Francisco 49ers, the 1 seed in the NFC, booked as a full touchdown favorite against the Detroit Lions. Craig, we've seen a little bit of movement when it comes to this spread and the total for NFC Championship game on Sunday. It was 6.5 early this week. Add on that hook, we're at a full touchdown. If you were to look at the juice in terms of what is more likely, it's minus 115 right now. If you want to lay the touchdown number with San Francisco, meaning could we see potentially more movement by the time we get to Sunday night, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, that slated kick out in Santa Clara. The total opened at 50.5 as well. It is now up by a full point, 51 and a hook. The Lions, the worst scoring defense remaining in this postseason, averaging more than 23 points per game given up to the opposition. San Francisco, Craig, prior to last week, in its 12 regular season wins, had scored at least 27 points and won every game by at least a touchdown. San Francisco very comfortable in this spot. It will be the 12th game this season for San Francisco, booked as at least a touchdown favorite. The 49ers favored in all 18 games so far. Only the fourth game rather, for Detroit this year, booked as an underdog, which is quite a role reversal from the opening 2 seasons under Dan Campbell. In those first 2 years, 2021 and 2022, the Lions were the underdog 28 of 34 games, 19-9 against the spread. In the 3 games for Detroit as an underdog this year, all on the road, 2-1 against the number, 1 outright victory in the very first game of the season on the road in Kansas City. In fact, Craig, you'll hear some narratives this weekend about Jared Goff and playing outdoors and not being in the dome in Detroit, but the Lions actually better covering on the road this year, 7-2 ATS, than they are in the Motor City, just 6-4 against the spread. And yes, it is outdoors, and yes, it is not a dome for Jared Goff, and the completion percentage does drop for Goff in these spots. But the forecast in his native Northern California on Sunday night, around 70 degrees with very, very minimal winds, as close to dome conditions as you will find at this time of the year in January playing outdoors. So that's where things stand, Craig, in the NFC Championship game between San Francisco and Detroit. The 49ers looking to get back to the Super Bowl for the first time since the 2019 NFL season. The Detroit Lions looking to get to the big game for the first time ever in franchise history.
All right, thanks very much, Ben. Now it's time to take a closer look at the NFC Championship, the AFC Championship, and some props for the weekend as well. It's time for the Sharp Report. All right, let's bring Warren in. And Warren, a rare week in the NFL. We're down to 2 games left here, AFC and NFC Championship. Lines come out on Sunday night, and here we are on Friday. They're the same. So essentially, we're trying to find any value we possibly can, and I'm looking forward to breaking the games down with you here.
Yeah, it's going to be sad after this. Only 1 game left, and we'll have 2 weeks to look forward to it. But certainly exciting for the fan bases of these 4 teams, and I think the Detroit Lions well deserving of getting here. And every fan base should be able to enjoy a championship game once in a while. So it's fun to see them here and excited for it. And I'm really excited to see what happens in that AFC one as well. So let's break these games down.
All right, so let's get started here. Sunday night, the line opens up, and the Ravens are 3.5-point favorites. I come on with you on Monday and say by the time Friday comes, it's going to be 3, and I'm completely wrong. I mean, there's 4 in some spots. The Ravens are strong 3.5-point favorites here, total 44.5. What should I be reading into that? Anything?
Well, certainly earlier this week, I think it was Tuesday, and then again a little bit on Wednesday, the sharper books out in Vegas were taking bets on the Baltimore Ravens one by one. They were moving their number to 4. It wasn't a organized move where every single book was hit at the same time. These guys were slowly taking money on the Baltimore Ravens. And what's interesting to me is, we know that this is the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has had since he's been playing for the Kansas City Chiefs and making these runs deep into the Super Bowl and these championship games. But the ironic part about this to me is that this is the worst offense for that best defense to be going up against. The way that this defense is built with Spags, they got a great outside cover corner in L'Jarius Sneed who can follow. They're really good against the pass. They play really well with a lead because then you're going to be passing on them to try to get back into the game. Well, the problem for them is they're going up against a Ravens team and the Chiefs' own offense isn't as great this year. So the odds of the Chiefs playing with a big lead and the Ravens just have to resort to nothing but the pass have been diminished. And then the way the Ravens are built, it's actually built to attack what this Chiefs defense doesn't perform typically good against. And that's the run game. That's a really diverse passing attack. They don't have a number one receiving threat who they're going to funnel, 10, 11, 12 targets to that Snead can just erase. Like maybe they took Diggs out of the game last week. They don't have a number one wide receiver like that. They like to play with a diverse rushing attack where they can bring a fullback out on the field or they can bring one tight end or two tight ends out on the field. They also have a running quarterback. So all these different run types and schemes, it's not like here's our cookie cutter run offense, here's our number one punch, and we use that number one punch all the time with our primary back. They split it up. They switch it around with multiple backs and Lamar Jackson. And then the pass game is just so diverse because they're throwing to tight ends. They're throwing to wide receiver short. They're throwing a little bit to running backs. Lamar scrambling on some of the pass plays that break down. And there are just so many different things that this Ravens offense does that a typical offense would not be doing, and that a typical offense would have struggles against the Kansas City Chiefs, but I don't know that this Ravens offense will nearly as much.
Yeah, it should be a fascinating game. Game one of the two. The second game on Sunday, the 49ers open up 7-point favorites. Here we are on Friday, same line, total 51.5. Lions continually going over the number over the course of the season. So maybe that's one position potentially to take. 49ers were a few plays away from losing that game outright to Green Bay last week. Maybe the Lions can have that same success. The discussion about Goff playing indoors versus outdoors, definitely valid. Warren, any interesting notes or positions you have on this game on Sunday?
I just think one key thing to note with the Ravens as well as with the 49ers is we have seen now for several years these teams where they're the only team that earned a bye and they basically get to rest their guys week 18. So they don't play week 18, then they don't play week 19 because that's the wild card round, and they come back in the divisional round. They have looked rusty. So something to move forward with in the teams that they're going up against in that divisional round. Teams like the Packers, they had to win games down the stretch. So they were having de facto playoff games week 17, week 18. Then they played in week 19 as a playoff game in the wild card round. These teams are lubed up, ready to go. They've been playing playoff football for weeks, whereas the Ravens and the 49ers were sitting around. They're trying to figure out how to shake the rust off. And then you had Brock Purdy, who they were anticipating we might have to deal with rain. Wear your glove. Practice with your glove. We've got to design a lot of things for Debo. Then they get out there. Yep, it's definitely raining. Our Debo game plan's intact. Let's roll out with it. And then all of a sudden, early in the game, Debo goes down. The glove comes off. It's still raining. Brock Purdy doesn't look comfortable. I would not read too much into that for this game. I think we're going to see a different style of offense here for the San Francisco 49ers, one that has confidence in Brock Purdy. I don't think they lost any confidence in Brock Purdy because he didn't play well with his hands in the rain without Debo. I think they're going to have a lot of success in this game, doing a lot through the air. The Lions have to step up that run defense. They have to figure out a way. Rashad White was having a lot more success early on in last week's game than I think I anticipated against the stout Lions run defense. If they can't take away one phase of the 49ers, they're going to be in trouble. If they can't stop the run at least, because we know they're going to struggle to stop the pass, but if they can at least make this game on Brock Purdy's shoulders and make the 49ers somewhat one-dimensional, they really could lose this game by double digits. So they have to come out here, figure out a way to stop that run, but I still think Brock Purdy is going to have success passing the football against the secondary. George Kittle should, Ayuk should, and then Debo Samuel, look, if Debo Samuel doesn't play this game, he's obviously trending towards playing. but I highly doubt that they're going to use him in as many run plays. I highly doubt that they're going to use him in as many snaps overall, especially if this game gets a little bit out of hand. Brock Purdy's been fine without Deebo Samuel. I know the narrative is like the Niners can't win if Brock Purdy's not on the field because you're looking at just win-loss statistics. But if you look at what Brock Purdy has done anytime that Deebo has been off the field this year, number 1 in yards per attempt, number 1 in success rate, number 1 in EPA, number 1 in touchdown rate, number 1 in interception rate. He's just been elite passing the football without Deebo Samuel on the field. So I don't necessarily think that this offense is just going to crater because Deebo Samuel's not available as frequently as they would like.
Yeah, and I think that that's a fair take to have because they do have a lot of other talented players. And look, I know you pivoted over to props the last few weeks with the playoffs. They've been great. So let's see if we can nail a couple of more here going into the weekend. And your focus for now, I mean, maybe there's more, Warren, but certainly let's look at George Kittle here, the tight end for the San Francisco 49ers. And I guess the question that I would have for you as a caveat or a main point of emphasis before we get off the air today is the opinion on Kittle. Is this with Deebo, without Deebo, or just independent of whatever happens?
That's a great note. I think that if you haven't bet this yet and it's looking like Deebo is trying to play, I would be sitting on the sidelines and wait. So I'm going to advise that you bet the over in receiving yards for George Kittle, but I think that you should wait until Deebo likely gets announced up. I think with or without Deebo, he's going to go over his number. The number might drop by a few yards. He's still going to hit it. Even if it's at the current number, he's going to hit it. And the reason is because the Lions struggle against these tight ends. They rank bottom 10 defending tight ends. They've gone up against no real true tight ends. The best ones that they've gone up against, the best one was Mark Andrews, and the second best one was Cole Kmet. That's it. Those are the only two tight ends. George Kittle is obviously a vastly different tight end from them. He's going to have some big plays and explosive plays through the air. I think if the Lions have some success in slowing down the run game to an extent, it's just going to be passing the ball through the air. And then, of course, if Deebo happens to be out, the player who benefits the most actually from a target perspective is not Ayuk. Ayuk's still going to get his. It's actually George Kittle. They go to George Kittle more when Deebo's off the field than Ayuk.
Brock Purdy, anything particularly on him you want to mention before we go?
Well, the one thing I'll say is I like the long shot. I like Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, both of those guys. Put a long shot bet on either of those guys to have an interception. Jared Goff throws to the middle of the field more than any other quarterback in the NFL. And the 49ers are outstanding top 5 defending middle of the field passes. They have 17 interceptions over the middle of the field. The guy who has the most is Fred Warner. And the last 5 interceptions that Jared Goff has thrown, 4 of those 5 have either been Sam Laporta or his running backs. Those are guys that are going to be covered by these linebackers. I think they're going to have some success here. Maybe get lucky with a pick. It's obviously not a lock. It's a long shot, but throw down a little bit of cash on that one.
All right. See you Monday, Warren. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Good luck.
All right. Warren will be on Scott Farrell coming up later. We'll be right back.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now he's a little bit more over money, but he's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division favorite.
I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different like roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
He feels like he's got unfinished business, right? He won the national championship, did what he said he wanted to do going back to Ann Arbor.
And, he coached, I think, with the Raiders as an assistant and then got the job with the Niners and then went to title games, went to Super Bowls, lost to his brother. And I think you're right, unfinished business, go back, try to win a Super Bowl.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Maybe the biggest surprise of the week in sports comes from this next story. Bill Belichick did not get the head coaching gig with the Atlanta Falcons, Los Angeles Chargers, or anywhere else. Bill Belichick has not been hired by anyone, and there are only two spots left, Seattle and Washington. Is it possible that the second most winningest coach in the National Football League will not be on the sidelines this season? This sort of goes against every other prediction that was made by people who are in the know around the NFL. So far be it from me to speculate why, but naturally, is this the end of the line? Have we seen Belichick coach in the NFL for the last time? Even at his press conference, Robert Kraft said that he thought that potentially he could have gotten a draft pick for Bill Belichick. Even Kraft was wrong about that too, if no one's going to hire him. So a very peculiar story that has played out this week, and I'm very curious to hear the reasons why, because naturally, with or without Tom Brady, I don't care. The guy's won a lot of games. Don't forget, Matt Castle was the quarterback of the Patriots the year Brady missed the whole year too. No one seems to be mentioning that as well. Anyway, that'll do it for our show today. Thanks again, of course, to Warren Sharp for coming on the program. Also, our guest from Legal Sports Report, Matt Waters, and from Sporting News, Vinnie Iyer. Our associate producer, Michael Cohen, our producer, Sam Yarnell, and I'm Craig Mish. Coming up next, we got the early line, followed by Pharrell Coast to Coast at 3 o'clock Eastern. I'll be back with you tomorrow for our next edition of Fantasy Sports Today. It is myself and Davis Maddock tomorrow morning, so make sure you tune into that show. And then on Sunday morning, we're going to have our friends. It is Joe Pisapia and Matt Stryker. They have you completely covered on the Sunday morning edition of Fantasy Sports Today. If fantasy is not your thing and NewsWire is, I got good news. I'll see you Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. I hope you enjoy the two football games this weekend, as well as some golf, of course, hockey, basketball. We've got so much going on here at SportsGrid with our in-game live programming, so I hope you enjoy it all and enjoy it. Have a good weekend. See you Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern.